Hello and welcome to Kickback Science Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Luke. This podcast is your place to get the tools and knowledge necessary to navigate the world of health and wellness. So kick back and let's talk science. This is good content. This stuff has gone crazy. We'll jump into it. Let's dive in. Let's do a little science. I'm going nitty gritty science right now.
I've been looking forward to this.
Kind of going on a little bit of a tangent. Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. The information we discuss in this podcast is not meant to be taken as medical advice. It is simply informative. We're not affiliated with any organization or institution, just a few guys talking science and having fun.
Okay, I think that'll do it.
Boom,
I think I'll be able to line that shit up.
I hope you can.
That should line everything up.
I was like really quietly going into my microphone.
And I said, let's get it. Like really quiet.
Mess up all your editing.
Good morning.
Man, good morning,
Morning, guys.
gentlemen.
I miss you guys.
Good morning. Good morning.
It is a good morning.
Feeling a little tight today.
Yeah?
Did a lot of dancing this weekend.
Yeah? Dancing's great cardio.
Dude, 4 hours of it, yeah.
How about
Get your steps in.
you did yoga recently, didn't you?
I did do yoga.
How was that?
I
How was
also
that
started
experience?
taking fiber, actually.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
I'm coming, baby. Wait.
Convincing this guy.
I did too, and it sounded like World War III was going on in my stomach. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to dial back a little bit.
Yeah, actually, and the yoga I did was in a hot room. But I don't think it was hot enough for like the sauna aspect of it, but it was like 90 degrees in there.
Yeah?
Yeah. And I tell you what, I can't stretch at all. I need to work on that.
Yeah, get some mobility.
I got to 11 minutes the other day on the sauna, guys.
In the sauna?
You'd be really proud of me.
Hey, you're into that. You're into that next group of benefits. It goes from 0 to 10, and then from 11 to 19, and then 20 on.
Oh,
I've yet to.
You'll be up
the
to 20
sauna.
in no time. Do the sauna. It's great.
I know I need to, but
It's great. It's a great social thing too. If you go to the same sauna, like I go to the same one every day, and then you end up being in there with the same people, and then you're just sitting there chatting.
Hey, Bill.
It's great. Yeah.
All right, let's get this thing started here.
Yeah, what do we got
Ready?
today?
Why not?
All right, welcome back, everybody, to Kickback Science with your co-host, Reed. You also got Dr. Luke, another co-host, and then behind the scenes, we got Joe.
Hello.
Say what's up, Joe. There you go.
Hello.
There we go. So today, we're going to talk all things protein. What it is, how much do we need? Is it good for us? Is it bad for us? Tell us the science behind it, Dr. Luke.
Yeah, this one we've got a lot to talk about. I mean, to start off, let's just talk about like what protein is exactly. So you hear people talk about macronutrients, fats, carbohydrates, and protein. And protein is essentially a bunch of amino acids that come together to form a protein. And your body needs 20 different amino acids to build proteins within it. And 11 of those 11 of those amino acids are what we call non-essential, meaning that your body has the components necessary to actually create these amino acids on its own. But 9 of them are what are called essential amino acids, meaning you have to get that from a diet of any source. Your body's not able to make them. And what happens when you take in protein is that protein will get broken down into these amino acid components. Those amino acids will then get absorbed and then delivered straight to your liver. So they get absorbed from your gut into what's called the portal circulation, and it's a vein that just goes directly from your gut to your liver. Your liver wants access to all your food right away. Fats are different. Fats get emptied into your lymphatic system and such, but it's so important to deliver fuels to your liver first. And that's why we have this vein that goes directly from our gut to the liver. And that's what happens with amino acids. And I bring that up because we're going to come back to this point of what's called first pass metabolism, where liver kind of gets first dibs on anything you take in. So liver's super selfish, but it's also a giver. The liver's a giver in terms of like, it's going to take what it needs, but it's also going to make sure everyone else at the party is well accounted for. It's going to send fuels to different parts of the body, including even your brain, making sure that your brain has everything it needs to function. So that's why it's so important to send everything to the liver. Now, when we absorb these amino acids, our cells in our body are able to use our DNA. We have what are called messenger RNA components of our DNA. It's basically our DNA's ability to tell the cell what proteins to build. And proteins are kind of the building blocks of everything in your body. Every cell is made up of proteins. And so when we throw this word protein around, it's kind of covering like a majority of components of a majority of cells in a majority of your organs. So like things like when we talk about, insulin. Insulin is a protein, or collagen. People talk about collagen being part of connective tissue. That's a protein. Your body has to build these. And so that's, essentially why we need protein is for building blocks of, being able to regenerate things that get broken down, making sure we have the components to maintain organ function, improve any damage, and so on. And so your body's kind of recycling through protein day to day. It will break down proteins and rebuild them constantly. That's happening all the time. Now, one area or one organ that does a ton of protein synthesis or building new proteins is your muscle. And muscle demands a pretty high amount of amino acids to stimulate that protein synthesis. And so I wanted to cover that of like what protein is. It's essentially there to provide these building blocks for your body. It's separate to like carbohydrates and fat that you take in to utilize for energy. I mean, there's some components of fat that like a cholesterol provides some stability for the membrane of all your cells, but it's mostly fat and carbohydrate intake is there to provide energy, to provide fuel. That is not why you take in protein. Amino acids can be utilized for energy. They can be oxidized and broken down. The liver can take up certain amino acids and produce them into glucose. That does happen, but your body does not want to do that. It doesn't want to use protein as energy. It wants to use protein to build. Okay? So it's different than carbohydrates and fats.
Now, when you say branch chain, no, you didn't say branch chain amino acids.
I didn't yet.
Okay, well, you were talking about amino acids. Is that the same thing as branch chain amino acids? So, the supplement you take?
Branch chain amino acids are a few of those essential amino acids. So leucine, isoleucine, and valine, those three are your branch chain amino acids that have shown to provide quite a bit of stimulus to the muscle to tell it to grow. But other amino acids are able to do that. And branch chain amino acids just happen to be really good at stimulating this protein synthesis and also the capability to be broken down and utilized as fuel. So when we're talking amino acids, branch chain amino acids are contained within those.
Okay. So that supplement, I mean, I've heard it doesn't do anything. Is that true?
I heard that same thing. I used to take them, and then I heard
I still take them
for you, and I'm like, I'm wasting all of this money. And
I still take them. I don't know. I like the taste of it.
So what's interesting about like, does it do anything? In order to answer that question, let's talk a little bit about what protein does to the muscle specifically.
Okay.
And I mean, in this podcast, we're going to be talking a ton about health and longevity. And one of the most important things you can do for your health is maintain as much muscle mass as you possibly can. And as you age, muscle starts to get degraded a little bit quicker, and you actually need to supplement with more protein in order to sustain that muscle mass. Because what happens when muscle gets broken down is those proteins that make up the muscle cells themselves are getting broken down and recycled, and that's what decreases the size of the muscle. So you need to replenish protein in order to build and maintain that muscle mass. So branch chain amino acids are, really, they got a lot of hype because of their ability and sensitivity to stimulate this protein synthesis.
So it's aiding in this protein system.
Right. Right. And as it turns out, your muscle cell needs a specific amount of circulating amino acids in order to stimulate protein synthesis, in order for that protein synthesis to happen. Your muscle's kind of sitting there waiting for, after your liver breaks down these amino acids, sends it into the bloodstream, your muscle's kind of peeking out saying, okay, what's the state of our body right now? Can I take these amino acids and utilize them to build, or are we going to need those to go back to the liver, provide fuel for the brain, provide fuel for other organs? The muscle doesn't want to take those amino acids unless absolutely necessary. So it requires a pretty high amount of circulating amino acids to stimulate protein synthesis. And so this is where the branched chain amino acids come in of like, oh, if we can increase these branched chain amino acids, we can kind of target the muscle's protein synthesis specifically. Because again, all your other organs are going through protein synthesis. They don't require as much circulating amino acids to activate. Your liver gets it straight from your gut. Your liver can, a very small amount of protein intake can stimulate protein synthesis within the liver, but that's not the case for the muscle. Now, the thing with branched chain amino acids, and the reason that you don't necessarily need to supplement with them, but you should make sure you're getting them, or you're getting a sufficient amount of branched chain amino acids, is because these are contained in most protein sources, especially animal-based proteins. So if you're getting any sort of like meat, dairy, protein that comes from an animal, or when you're supplementing with whey proteins, you're going to have plenty of those branched chain amino acids. The really, really important amino acid in terms of direct stimulation of muscle protein synthesis is leucine. And plant-based proteins are very deficient in leucine versus animal-based proteins and protein supplements powder form are higher in leucine. Leucine has this capability to directly stimulate what's called mTOR, or mechanistic target of rapamycin. This is this thing inside of your muscle cell that's basically just waiting to just go ham on building. It just kind of sits there, and it'll once it's activated by leucine, among other things, it'll basically tell the cell, all right, time to build, let's go, let's bulk. And so leucine's able to do that and stimulate that process. If you don't have enough amino acids circulating, especially if you don't have enough leucine, mTOR is not going to be active, and you're not going to be able to get into what's called this anabolic state, or the state of protein synthesis or building. And so that's why, the BCA supplements, if you're on a animal-based diet, you'll benefit from that. But what I would recommend is supplementing with a protein that has all essential amino acids. You don't just have to focus on these branched chain amino acids.
You heard it here first this whole time. I thought they're like, you're just wasting your money there. And I was like, well, I'm going to throw this stuff away. I'll never buy it again. But hey, maybe I'll supplement it, or just look for a protein that has that in there.
Yeah, and they will. I mean, most proteins that circulate on the market now, take a peek at them. They're going to have those branched chain amino acids.
So you don't need to add on top of it.
Right.
So it's kind of a waste if you, okay. That's good to know.
So if you like them, use them? Or
well, I would say don't waste your money on buying a protein supplement that already has BCAAs and then also buying BCAAs, Okay, your protein supplement has them.
That brings me to one of my other questions I had. With working out and building muscle, is there a window prior to working out or after working out that is the best for building that muscle? So this is a super interesting area of study as far as timing, how should we time our protein intake. And as it turns out, so Don Lehman, he runs a nutrition lab over at the University of Illinois. He's kind of one of the pioneers of protein research and protein intake and protein timing and quantity and all these things. He's put out a ton of research on this anabolic window that you get from resistance training specifically. And early on, it seemed to be that, when you exercise, you're in a catabolic state while you exercise, meaning that your body's breaking down proteins, breaking down fuel.
that makes sense, right? You're trying to exercise. You can't grow muscle like during exercise because you're in this catabolic state. Your cells have what's called AMPK. AMPK basically shuts off that mTOR, that mechanistic target of rapamycin, the guy who's just sitting there waiting like, let's build. AMPK is like, hey, hold off, dude. Chill out. That AMPK is activated when you exercise, so it kind of keeps mTOR at bay. And it's like, okay, we need that breakdown feel right now. Our muscles need this energy to go through whatever stress this is. It happens to be exercise in this instance. So mTOR is like, fine, all right, just let me know when I can build. and so this process of being in a catabolic state while you're exercising actually shifts to be quite anabolic after exercising, especially resistance training. So resistance training, as you're breaking or as you're providing the stress to your muscle, it basically, after you're done exercising, stimulates that muscle to be like, whoa, that was tough. Let's build so that next time that happens, we're going to be a lot stronger and a lot more well-equipped. So mTOR is like, yo, build more muscle fibers, active myosin, get going. And then you have these muscle cells are what are called multinucleated cells. They have multiple nuclei. Most cells just have one nucleus within them that, well, I should say all cells other than muscle cells have one nucleus within them that tell the cells what to do. Muscle cells need so much freaking protein, and they need to build so much that they have multiple nuclei just kind of sitting all around. And mTOR's like, yo, satellite cells, that's what they're called. Start making more actin and myosin, grow, and you start to see bigger muscles and better capability to improve strength and such. So that anabolic window is very high immediately after exercise, but it's actually sustained for up to 12 to even 24 hours after.
Okay, so the
actually, there's
window
research
isn't as
suggesting
short.
36 hours afterwards.
I always thought it was 30 minutes.
So
that's how like my protein bags are like 30 minutes after. Take this.
That's
workout.
That's what I've heard is
Every
like
single
you
day.
have 30 minutes to get your protein.
Yeah.
I'm like, I can't get home, cook dinner in 5 minutes.
Takes
and
me 30
eat
minutes to get
protein,
home.
So what's interesting though about the literature? So early studies suggested that we had this 2-hour anabolic window to take advantage of, and that still seems to hold true in some aspects. But it turns out it depends on how trained you are. Now, if you're an untrained individual going through early phases of a resistance training protocol, you're going to be a lot more catabolic when you're exercising, and your anabolic window is actually likely going to be a little bit shorter. And so if you're just getting into resistance training, you may want to take advantage of this high anabolic window after resistance training, which could be around 2 hours, but it's actually likely a lot more, and supplement after your workout. But
Does that depend on how hard you train?
It does. It absolutely does.
Okay.
So if you're training to grow muscle and to grow strength, you're training at a high intensity, whether it be, repetitions, weight sets, or what have you. If you're not training at a high intensity, you're not going to stimulate this anabolic window as much. And it turns out that anabolic window is ramped up quite a bit after resistance training for a couple hours. But if you're highly trained, that anabolic window is so much more constant, or it's prolonged, because your body is habituated to this frequent exercise, frequent resistance training, plus frequent protein intake. If you are a highly trained individual, you're focused on your protein intake, you're focused on resistance training, your body is getting that stimulus of anabolism constantly. And so protein timing isn't going to be as much of a big deal if you're highly trained. You just want to make sure you're getting enough protein throughout the day, circulated through meals. So it's not as big of a deal. There was a pretty cool study that was just done a couple months ago. And what they did is they took a group of adults, so these were adult males, and they had them, first of all, I can't talk today. First of all, they divided them into a few different groups, but they screened them to see their activity level. So they didn't want sedentary individuals. They wanted someone who worked out at least 1 day per week, but somebody who didn't work out more than 3 days per week. So 1 to 3 days per week was their activity level. So, trained but not fully adapted probably. And they had them in different groups of no protein intake, 25 grams of protein intake, and 100 grams of protein intake after their workout. And they just did one workout. It was a full body workout, and it was pretty high intensity. They did a warm up. They were on the bike, and then they did a lat pull down, leg press, leg extension, and a chest press at 80% of 1 rep max for 4 sets. And they ended up inducing failure on sets 2 to 4. And so that's a pretty difficult workout if you're going to failure on multiple sets. So that there's been protein damage that's been induced. And then they gave them the protein immediately after. And what they saw is that there's this increase in this anabolic state, or this ability of the muscle to go through protein synthesis as protein increases. And that anabolic window, they had them sit in this lab for 12 hours and just chilled. And they were checking their blood, checking their muscle, checking their blood every 30 minutes, checking their muscle samples. So they were basically like grabbing a sample of a lower body muscle every 4 hours for that 12 hours as they're just sitting there. So those participants are amazing. I want to give them a high five. And they were looking at how well did the muscle take up that protein and induce protein synthesis and what happened for 12 hours. And they were still in this anabolic phase, even just chilling there afterwards. But what that gets at more is that protein intake is also inducing that anabolic state. So it's not, in this instance, it's not just the resistance training group. So the control participants had improved muscle protein synthesis and were in an anabolic window from the resistance training, but adding that protein did prolong it. And so if you are adding protein after your workout, you're prolonging that anabolic window. But again, and it's much longer than you would think. I mean, in this paper, they showed it was still elevated 12 hours post-consumption. And yeah, so it's not quite the timing of protein after exercise specifically isn't so, set in stone here. It probably depends on your level of training. I mean, if you want me to keep going, I'll keep going, because protein timing covers other aspects. I mean, people are wondering, okay, should I supplement with protein beforehand? Is that going to contribute to the catabolic state I get when I exercise? Now, there are papers showing that when you do supplement with protein beforehand, there's certain increases in an anabolic window afterwards, but that's probably not because of the timing of when they took the protein. It's just the fact that they did take the protein.
So does that protein, like when you take that protein before you work out, does it, so the mTOR, that gets shut down still, right? Does that also mean the protein gets shut down from going into your muscles?
So, and that's a super, super important point, because when you take this protein in, sure, you can stimulate mTOR. But if you're doing a high-intensity exercise protocol, like specifically with resistance training, you're stimulating that AMPK, you're shutting off that mTOR, so you're still going to be in that catabolic state. That you're not going to prevent a catabolic state from happening if you're exercising at these high intensities. So it probably doesn't make a difference before or after with protein intake. But when we get more into timing, that Don Lehman's lab did a cool study of people who took in, it was 90 grams of protein over the course of a day, and they split it heavier protein intake early in the day. So they did 3 different timings. So they did 60, 20, 10 in one group. So 60 grams for breakfast, 20 for lunch, 10 for dinner, versus 30, 30, 30. So time it out evenly. And what they found was this level of protein synthesis improved in these early loaded protein intake groups. So that's 60 grams in the morning. And so when we talk about protein timing, it's actually likely that early on in the day is going to be super important, because you've just come from this state where you're sleeping, you're fasted, and your other organs in your body do just fine during that period of time, but your muscles specifically, remember, it needs a high amount of circulating amino acids to be stimulated. So your muscle needs that high protein intake earlier on to stimulate that anabolic phase and to not be breaking down protein, to not stay in that catabolic phase. So early, but then also a late protein meal, so shifting that protein later, is going to, again, stimulate that anabolic state within the muscle specifically and help you through that fasting period overnight. And so this, protein timing, it's super important to just make sure you're not in this catabolic state if your goal is to gain lean body mass, which even if it's just a sustained lean body mass, which everybody's goal should be, you just want to make sure you're not in this state of breaking down muscle.
Luke, can we talk about how much protein we need a day? I know you're saying 60 grams of protein in the morning. Like, what does that look like? What kind of, like, what food would that look like? Would you eat, like, eggs, cottage cheese, nuts, peanut butter toast? Like, how do you get 60 in the morning? What would that look like? And, like, how much does a person need a day? That's
so
questions.
I'd say, I'd say, so you don't have to get 60 grams. This was just from one particular study. 60 grams of protein is quite a bit in one meal. Now, you're going to want to get at least 25, 30 grams in one meal. And this is another important point. If you're taking in small, snackable protein snacks throughout the day that are like 15 less grams of protein, your liver's breaking down a bunch of those, or your gut's breaking down that protein, and your liver is hogging most of that amino acid, remember. That's that first pass metabolism. About 50% of the protein you take in, your liver is going to need to utilize and provide to other organs as well. So your muscle is really not a lot of amino acids then make it into circulation. And your muscle needs a certain amount. Turns out right around that 25, 30 grams is a very good amount to make sure you have enough circulating amino acids to stimulate protein synthesis. So when you're taking these small protein snacks spread out throughout the day, sure, you can add up to a similar protein quantity, but you're not getting that added stimulated muscle protein synthesis. And so for breakfast, you don't need 60 grams of protein when you wake up, but you do want to make sure you're getting that 25 to 30.
25 to 30? Wow, I did not know that. That's crazy because I usually take little tiny snacks of protein throughout the day and then have those lunch and dinner a little bigger protein, but that makes sense. How do the insulin levels look in the morning when you eat protein compared to, like, say you'd eat like a bagel or something?
So with insulin levels, insulin's super sensitive to glucose. So when you take in carbohydrates, that gets converted into glucose in the bloodstream, insulin's going to skyrocket. That doesn't happen with protein. And what's interesting is there's Don Lehman's group did a couple different papers where they tried to substitute protein for carbohydrates in people's diets. So they had a high carb, low protein, and then a low carb, high protein. I always mess those up when I try to explain it, so I had to take my time there. And they did these in a couple different models, and they showed that when you drop carbohydrates and increase protein intake, insulin responses are suppressed, glycemic regulation is improved, so blood glucose levels, triglycerides are improved. They also lose more fat and maintain more muscle mass. So this is an interesting point that doesn't really get at your question, but it's about weight loss with protein, because this points to this super cool area of research that, in a matched calorie intake diet here, people that had more protein and less carbohydrates here, and I'm not bashing on carbohydrates. I want to make that a point. I'm not trying to say drop.
What type of carbohydrates are you talking?
So carbohydrates come from, like your pastas
vegetables,
and, like bread, pasta,
so you're talking like
sugars,
starchy,
cookies,
any carbs.
Carbohydrate. Any carbohydrate. So if you have carbohydrates, they're going to get broken into glucose, whatever way you spin it. Now, what they did in these studies and the outcomes that they found were super cool. They had these, matched calorie intake groups that just had higher protein and lower carbs versus the lower protein, higher carb group. And they lost more weight. Now that's, when you think of it in terms of this energy in, energy out model, how do you lose more weight when you're taking in the same amount of calories? And it turns out because protein has a very high thermic effect. So you get this thermic effect of food in terms of like it, when you take in protein, your body actually has to utilize more energy to digest, break it down. So it raises your metabolic rate slightly. And they found that just increasing protein intake had about 170 calorie per day effect on these individuals that resulted in this drop in body fat and then increase in lean body mass because you're taking in protein. And they also felt more full. So the surveys they did, they didn't do a very good job of actually assessing satiety here. But based on the data that they do have, the people with on the high carbohydrate tended to, vocalize their feeling of hunger and dissatisfaction, and versus the high protein and like that satiety effect. And this has been shown with protein resulting in a higher satiety effect. When you take in higher amounts of protein, you're going to feel more full. So now you have this increased protein resulting in greater weight loss, and not just weight, but body fat specifically, because you've got protein, you're not going to lose that lean body mass like you would see if you're just, straight up restricting calories, but not focusing on protein.
And then did you touch up on how much protein each person needs per day?
I keep going on tangents, so you got to keep bringing me back.
I know. I don't think you hit that one there.
So as far as protein per day, what's interesting about this is we have our recommended daily allowance of protein, and it is 0.8 grams per kilogram. But that number is such bullshit.
What's that in pounds?
So a kilogram is... So if you take kilograms multiplied by 2.2, then you'll get pounds. So this 0.8 came from these animal studies way back in the early 1900s, where essentially they were just trying to see like, all right, how can we make sure our cows are not breaking down muscle? How can we make sure we get enough meat here? And they developed what are called nitrogen balance assessments. And what a nitrogen balance assessment is we talked about this in another podcast too, but you take in protein and it's made up of a percentage of nitrogen. And it turns out protein is the only nitrogen source of fuel that you're taking in. You do get nitrogen from nucleic acids and such, but mostly it all comes from protein. So you can measure how much nitrogen someone's taking in and then how much they're getting rid of. Because when your body breaks down protein, that nitrogen component gets excreted mainly in the kidneys as urea. And so you can measure urea excretion or nitrogen excretion in your urine and see how much protein people are peeing out versus how much they're taking in. If they're peeing out more than they're taking in, they're in what's called a negative nitrogen balance, meaning they're in this catabolic state. So they developed this for cows specifically to just determine, okay, how do we keep them in not a negative nitrogen balance, make sure they're getting enough protein intake to sustain lean body mass, because they don't want to lose money here. And so the nitrogen balance, it's been around for so long. We've been using this. You basically measure nitrogen and then you multiply it by 6.25. That's all you do. And then it's assuming that protein has 16% nitrogen, which we know is not actually the case. So it's not a very accurate measurement, and it has been around for 75 years and we haven't changed it. And it's going to underestimate how much protein they actually need, because your body can get rid of nitrogen in other areas. You can poop it out. You can get rid of it as cells die, hair follicles and such. And so it's an underestimated value, first of all. And plus, it was studied in humans in a group of college-age kids for like 7 days, and to get these values just to make sure, okay, how do you make sure you're not breaking down muscle tissue? So that's where the 0.8 grams comes from. But as it turns out, you need so much more protein than that. And the recommended amount for most adults seems to be this range, based on a group of meta-analyses, this range of 1.4 to 1.7 grams per kilogram. And if you're heavily involved in resistance training or extremely active, you're going to want to push that number up towards, 2 to even 2.4 grams per kilogram, which ends up being about a gram per pound. And the protein requirement is kind of sketchy to just think about it in that way, though, because when I say protein requirement, not all proteins are made equal. If I tell you need 1 gram per pound of protein and you take it all in a raw plant form, you're not getting even close to that, because the protein within plants aren't very bioavailable within your body's not able to absorb them efficiently because they're tied up in all these fibrous components of the plants. They're there for the plant specifically. And so your body doesn't get all the amino acids within the plant itself. And not only that, but the amino acids within the plant don't contain what we actually need. So those essential amino acids, especially things like leucine and methionine, those things are suppressed. They're essential amino acids. We need them again for protein synthesis in our bodies. And so if I tell you to get a gram per pound, but you're taking in animal products, plant-based products, then you're going to actually need to increase that slightly. Because what's really important to focus on is we don't have just a demand for protein. We have a demand for the essential amino acids within protein.
So you're talking, with the plant protein, how much more are you talking? So you said 2.4 for animal, let's say on the high end, right?
Yep.
What would the number look like for plant?
So with plants, 70% of raw plant-based protein is going to be absorbed. So you're probably going to want to increase that value by I would say probably about 10 to 20%, unless it's all straight raw, but most people don't just eat raw plants. You can, heat it up, cook it. It's going to break down those fibrous components. It's going to become more bioavailable. Or if you're supplementing with protein powder, if it's plant-based, is absorbed more readily than the plant itself. Still doesn't compare to like a whey protein. Whey protein has a 20% higher bioavailability than soy protein, for example. And so it's going to need to increase. I don't know the exact percentage here, but I would, because it totally depends on how you're taking in that protein.
Right.
But what's super interesting, and this is another side tangent. You guys ready?
Yeah,
Ready for it?
I'm always ready for
So
side tangents.
this is when I was doing the research on this stuff and just looking at protein composition within different foods, and the animal products having such high amounts of these essential amino acids, it makes sense. As you're eating meat from an animal, you're eating the muscle, it's going to have the amino acids that your muscle also needs to build. The proteins are going to be the same there, so the amino acid composition is the same. Well, it turns out that cows are a group of animals called ruminant animals, ruminant upcycling animals, meaning that, and what that is they have this ability within their gut. They have certain bacteria that can upcycle amino acids. So they eat plants all day. So because you think about it, how the hell do the cows get the protein they need to build their muscle if they're just eating plants, right? But they have this population of bacteria within their stomach that is able to take these amino acids from the plants and upcycle and convert them into these essential amino acids that then get taken in and built as into these muscle tissues. And so we need these upcycling animals like cows in order for us to get essential amino acids. We can't get them from plants. So a plant, when you spray plants with nitrogen, the bacteria lining the roots of the plants and such will take that nitrogen in and convert it to amino acids. The plants will take that up and utilize it. But a plant doesn't need the same amino acids we do. And so they're deficient in all those essential amino acids. But then the cow takes it in and then can actually turn 60 grams of plant-based protein and make 100 grams of essential amino acids with it. So they can upcycle the protein that it gets from the plant. It's pretty crazy.
How do vegans get those essential amino acids that you're saying? Like, they just have to eat a ton more because it's not as dense as eating meat protein?
Yeah, so for vegan supplements specifically, like certain soy-based, wheat-based, and like pea-based proteins, they're deficient in different essential amino acids. But if you have a blend, so when we talk about the vegan diet, so go listen to that one for more details on how to blend protein to get those essential amino acids, because you still can. You just have to blend different types of proteins to try to get to that essential amino acid, because it's not like they don't have them at all. It's just a matter of they don't need as much, plants don't need as much to grow as we do for our muscles. So they're just deficient in certain amino acids.
Sick.
But so like, as far as like protein quantity, it one of the things of getting protein in, it's totally going to depend on age. So children versus adolescents need slightly higher amounts of protein gram per pound as they're growing. I mean, total protein though is not going to be any different, or not going to be like way higher. I mean, it is going to be different. As you're younger, you're going to need a higher concentration per body weight of protein, and then as you age, you actually need more protein when you get older, and this is like, so many people don't understand this concept and don't follow this concept of like, oh, I don't need to take supplement with any sort of protein. I'm not a bodybuilder. And as you age, you become so much less efficient at this protein synthesis process. Now, the capability to go through protein synthesis may be impaired, but the capacity of older individuals is not. And this is well represented in a study where they took older individuals, supplemented with high amounts of protein at 1.6 grams per kilogram, and showed that they can resemble the protein synthesis rates that a 16-year-old was able to. And so increasing protein intake as you get older can still stimulate that protein synthesis, but you're not as efficient at baseline. And so as you age, you do need larger amount or higher amounts of protein intake to preserve lean body mass, because as you get older, you get weaker, muscles atrophy. You want to maintain that lean mass as much as you can, not just for moving around, but for your overall health. Muscle plays such an important role in every process of your body. And that is going to be a topic of an entire podcast of like why muscle is like one of the, I mean, I'd put it up there with the brain as the most important organ in your body. And so you want to sustain that for as long as you can. So yeah, the 1.4 to 1.7 seems to be the amount you want to shoot for, but increasing it is not going to have any detriment. There's this hot, debate of added protein and the effects that it's going to have on the kidney. And because when you take in this high amount of protein, when you break down protein, it gets excreted as urea. You end up inducing what's called hyperfiltration. So your kidney's just working more to excrete it. That is not hard on your kidney at all. Your kidney has quite a reserve capacity to go through that. So seeing an increase in filtration does not mean that you're inducing this damage to the kidney. And that's pretty evident at this point. There is people with chronic kidney disease, especially late stage. There's 5 different stages of chronic kidney disease. Stages 4 and 5, when people just don't have the capacity to go through, kidney filtration, blood filtration, because your kidneys are there to just regulate so much more than excreting urine. People on these late stage chronic kidney diseases need They go and do what's called dialysis, where they actually have this external filtration system for them because their kidneys can't filter very much. So in hospitals, you'll see this low protein intake diet to try to reduce kidney filtration. That's been used for quite a while, but if you look at recent position stands that have come out in the last couple of years, it seems to be that adding protein to these individuals actually is probably not having a harm on the kidney. And in fact, it is preserving lean body mass in these individuals as well. So, and we have medications to help with kidney function versus way back when we, just needed to reduce protein. So I imagine we're going to see that start to shift as well. So it's going to depend protein intake, on the stage of kidney disease and protein intake. So I'm not talking people with late stage kidney disease here at all, although, they might be able to handle protein. But if you're a healthy individual, even if you're not healthy in other aspects, you can handle so much protein. I mean, some of these studies are using 3.5 grams per kilogram in people, and it's very well tolerated. That is a huge amount of protein. Yeah. I dare you to even try to get that.
Yeah.
And they don't have these altered aspects of their health. So there doesn't seem, or we don't know of this upper limit yet. You don't just hear of people having like dying of protein toxicity, So when people try to argue like, oh, you're getting too much protein, it's hard on your kidneys, that does not seem to be the case.
Talking about too much protein, I've heard about in one meal, if you have 40 grams of protein, you're only going to intake like 70% of that. Is that true? Or can you, let's say I have a protein shake, 6 eggs, and I end up at 60 grams of protein for one meal. Am I going to utilize all of that protein?
Yeah. So I'm so glad you asked this question because you hear this so much. I get asked this all the time of like, oh, I thought your body can only digest 30 grams of protein. That seems to be the number. Do you guys hear 30 grams?
Yeah, I said 40, but I couldn't remember exactly what it was, but 30 sounds like
I hear 30 a lot. And Rita, when you were working at the gym, did you hear this too? Yeah, 30. Yep. So I hear this all the time. Now, your body can absorb as much protein as you take in. So if you took in 60 grams of protein and you could only absorb 30 of it, that other 30 is sitting in your intestines and you're going to end up having diarrhea to get rid of it. So if your body couldn't absorb more than 30 grams of protein, every time you ate an 8-ounce steak, you would just be shitting your brains out. So you can digest, you can digest as much protein as you take in. Now, the point people are probably trying to get at is the amount that your muscles specifically and this cap that it may potentially have. So remember, 50% of that amino acid intake is going to the liver. So if you take in this 40 grams, you only got 20% or 20 grams circulating in the bloodstream, and then your muscle cells taking that. So your 40 gram conversion, and these are just rough estimates. It's not this exact number like that, but so the amount you're taking in is not the amount that we're talking here in muscle protein synthesis. So yes, you can get plenty more than 30 grams. Now this idea of 30 grams though came from a paper that was comparing 0, 5, 10, 20, and 40 grams of protein and measuring protein synthesis rates and after resistance training exercise. And what they found is the protein synthesis rates from 20 to 40 were not different. But it did increase in a dose response of like 5 was better, 10 was better, 15 was better, 20 was better, and then 20 and 40 were the same. So it was this idea of like, oh, maybe your protein is halfway in between this 20 to 40, let's call it 30 grams, and any more than that might not actually benefit protein synthesis. However, this recent paper that I was talking about with the 100-gram supplement afterwards totally like drowns this idea, and I'm curious to see as more papers get pumped out because there might be a cap on muscle protein synthesis, and we'll see as that unfolds. But this paper of like 0 versus 25 versus 100, showing that 100 grams of protein stimulated protein synthesis more than 25, and that sustained for 40% longer. That anabolic window of protein synthesis, 100 grams sustained for 40% longer than 25. The problem with this study, though, is I wish they did it more like 25 versus 40 versus 60. Yeah, because it's like, okay, maybe there is a cap and it falls like somewhere between 25 and 100.
How are you going to eat 100 grams? That's like a whole cow.
Yeah. Jeez. Well, I mean, 100 grams, like there are times where I've taken in 100 gram meal for sure, but it's mostly because I'm taking a double scoop protein shake and then having a meal. Yeah. But I mean, this kind of shows like, okay, there probably is a cap for protein synthesis. I mean, there is. We just don't know it at this point, and it probably falls somewhere between that 25 to 100 grams. So no, this myth of like, oh, your body can only take in 30 grams is bullshit. I mean, and you can take in as much protein as you want.
So like a 200-pound guy shooting for 200 grams of protein. Maybe that, like you were saying before, morning seems to be the best time to get a large quantity of protein. And then after working out also seems to be a great time to get a large amount of protein. I guess what I'm asking here is like, okay, so let's ask you, what does a typical day of protein look like for you, and how do you decide when I guess when you're going to eat that protein?
So what I try to do is, like, I'll wake up and then me and Kato go on our adventures in the morning. I'm fasted at that point, not intentionally, just more so like he wakes me up and is like, Dad, yo, let's go walk around, see what those squirrels are up to. And so we just go. And then I come back about an hour later and I'm having coffee, and then I'll have my first meal, which at this point, and this changes depending on what, phase of my training I'm in right now. I'm trying to lose fat and preserve muscle mass. So I'm trying to increase my protein intake actually more than that 1 gram per pound, because I'm in a calorie deficit. And so I'll start my day with, it's 35 grams of protein in this breakfast of, granola, protein powder, and some like fiber grains and such. And then after that, I'll have a 20 gram granola bar. And then I'll have throughout the day, depending on when I'm doing my training, which at this point tends to be in the afternoon. If it's too late, I'll have a 50 gram protein supplement earlier on in the day before I do my training, because I don't want to go too long to, like, let's say I'm going to work out at like 5, 6 p.m. I don't want to wait till after I'm working out to do the protein shake. So I actually just have it like around lunchtime.
So like noon?
Yeah.
5 hours before you go work out? Sometimes.
Yeah, it depends.
Okay.
It depends on how long, because I don't want to go through a period of time where I'm not getting this protein intake. And so I try, basically what I'm trying to do, and my largest protein intake is with dinner. Now, this is because of my lifestyle and how I'm busy throughout the day. I wish I could tailor it to either breakfast or even lunch, lunch or even breakfast being my higher protein intake meal and higher, overall calorie intake. Although there is a study that did this where they matched calorie intake and protein intake and had people eat earlier in the day more calories versus later in the day more calories, and they didn't show any difference in energy expenditure, which is interesting. But I don't like the idea of eating a ton of food so close to sleep. Sometimes when I'm getting back from training, if it's like 7:30 p.m., I go to bed pretty early because me and Kato got to check on the squirrels really early in the morning. So I don't want to have this, ramped up metabolic rate close to bed, because I know my body has to cool itself down to induce sleep. So I try not to, but I don't mind the protein supplement later at night, if it's not high calorie intake and it's, just a protein supplement to try to take away from that catabolic phase. But essentially, so this is a long-winded way of answering your question. What I'm focusing on right now is that I have 4 different time points scattered throughout my day of at least 40 grams of protein.
Okay.
And a lot of times it's more than that, but I just make sure I scatter those. And that's with preservation or growth of lean mass. So if you want to grow muscle, just a morning and an evening protein, you're going to need more than that.
I'm going to need you to write this down for me.
Yeah, same here.
Hey, you just got to listen to the podcast again.
Yeah, because I struggle, man. I struggle with getting my protein. Although part of it is, now that we're talking about this protein and when you want it, this will segue into our next podcast. Well, potentially our next podcast. I do like intermittent fasting. Like I haven't been eating until 11 in the morning. And
Same
then, and it sounds like I've been doing it all wrong, but maybe not. I guess we'll find out.
Find out next episode.
But
Yeah, tune into the fasting.
I struggle getting enough protein,
Yeah.
and probably adding that breakfast would help.
Yep.
And like having a little snack in between breakfast and lunch.
Yeah, and that's like this. area of weight loss and such is super interesting, and like having protein intake is not going to increase in protein intake. You know, if you're fasting for a purpose of trying to lose body fat, increasing protein intake is not going to mess that up, such as like having breakfast high in carbohydrates.
Didn't you have a client that you worked with that you suggested higher amount of protein, and you were like, oh my God, it actually does work.
Yeah, this is a while back. So like getting familiar with the research on it, and I had this particular client when I was a personal trainer who really wanted to lose body fat but build muscle at the same time. And the research is pretty conflicting here. If you're in an energy deficit, how can you build muscle? And the only way to go about that when you're in this energy deficit is to just ramp up protein like crazy. And so that's what I had this individual do, is like, let's get protein as high as possible. And this person was training super, super hard. I was wondering how effective this was going to be, and it played out to a T, just so spot on. Like lean body mass increased and body fat dropped like crazy, but body weight stayed relatively stable because of this like high growth in lean body mass.
Yeah, muscle weighs more than fat. That was the big thing we always preached.
Yeah, I mean, and we'll talk about weight loss and such in a podcast, I imagine, but weight loss is just such a stupid goal to have.
Why are you hating on me like that? No, I'm just kidding.
But I mean,
I'm just kidding.
You like losing body fat is healthy, but
right.
Losing weight is not.
So when you step
healthy.
on a scale, that's skewed in such a big way because you're not actually measuring your fat.
Right. And most of the time, people go on these restricted diets and they reduce calories just to try to show it on that scale.
Yeah.
And they restrict calories, but restrict everything they're eating, and they don't keep their protein high. When you don't keep your protein high, you're losing weight, and a lot of that is coming from muscle. And so your new weight that you get at the end of that week is actually less healthy than you were before because you have lost this absolutely essential organ. You know, you never want to break down muscle. You want to preserve it at all costs. And so that's why weight is so dangerous for you to just monitor and if you are going to go in a deficit for weight loss, like right now, I am like trending down in body weight. However, I am increasing lean body mass. I'm in an energy deficit, but I have increased protein intake.
What do you mean by energy deficit?
Like my calorie intake is lower than my calorie output in a given day.
Yep. Got you. Crazy, dude.
So there's something I want to talk about. So everybody always references the protein farts, you know, when you drink protein shakes. I also had a client that I trained. I pushed on whey protein to him to build that muscle. And then he told me that his bowel movements and his stool wasn't regular. And it kind of messed everything up. Do you have any science behind why that is for some people, and like what your advice would be to not have that happen?
Yeah, so when you talk about like these issues with like flatulence, and as people will get an upset stomach with this increased protein bolus that they're taking in, and your gut lining has just a ton of different types of bacteria that break down fuels and excrete these byproducts, and it changes so frequently. Your gut microbiome does. And when you change a diet of any kind, you'll notice that impact because you start to get this, digestive system that is so used to breaking down certain fuels and become so adapted to that. And then you change it. And this process of breaking down fuels is so different. And I imagine that to be in line with what happens with a lot of people that increase protein intake. I didn't have this personally. And I don't know if it's because I've been supplementing with protein for however long. I mean, I was in early high school when I started, and maybe I just didn't really care. But I didn't have that, but I have heard that with a ton of people. And but I do know when that happens with people, as you prolong it, I mean, you'll get adapted to that level of protein, and it won't bother you.
And are there any differences in types of protein supplements? Like you got the plant-based, you got the whey, and then the isolate.
Yep.
Do they all do the same thing? Like kind of I don't really know the difference between, obviously the plant-based is not derived from animal, like the whey, but.
So whey protein, it used to just be in whey concentrate. And so it was this concentrated protein that had a lot of lactose. And people that were lactose intolerant weren't able to digest this whey concentrate. And so now pretty much every whey protein you get on the shelf is a blend of a concentrate and an isolate. And an isolate whey protein, what they're essentially doing is getting rid, so they've gotten rid of the lactose, most of it. Sometimes all of that lactose is removed. So people with lactose malabsorption or intolerance issues can take a whey supplement nowadays. I mean, you're going to have these blends. There's also people that don't metabolize lactalbumin very well, which isn't broken down in these blends. And so that's where you get the hydrolyzed whey. So hydrolyzed whey is essentially like this hypoallergenic protein supplement for people that have issues with absorption. So if you do have these digestive issues, you might want to try the whey hydrolate or the hydrolyzed whey protein. And this is it's essentially like pre-digested protein. So that lactose is gone, that lactalbumin's broken down for you, so you don't have to go through this process of trying to break it down. So if you have a hard time digesting the blends, the concentrate, first of all, check and make sure it's not just a straight up whey concentrate, and you might have lactose absorption issues. It's probably going to be a blend if you got it recently, or switch to a hydrolyzed whey and see if you respond better to that.
Definitely going to try that because I'm kind of doing a carnivore diet right now, and my stomach sounds like World War III.
Don't do the carnivore diet, Reed.
Well, I said I was going to do it. So it's kind of like a Joe Rogan with fruits. I mean, it's not super strict, but I'm trying to really increase that protein.
Mm-hmm. Gotta get your fiber.
Got to get the fiber. So I've really noticed that the first couple of days of doing it. So I'm kind of weaning off of it, but do notice the protein intake kind of upsets the stomach a little bit. So I'll definitely check that out. Do you have any brands that you would recommend for people, or?
What's casein protein? Is that part of the blend?
Casein protein is a milk-based protein. And most of the research that has been done is utilizing whey protein. But casein protein, the composition is going to be similar. I always just push people towards whey because that's usually what's used in these studies.
Okay.
I'm trying to put my plug in right now.
What about collagen?
Oh, yeah.
Collagen peptides. That's what I was going to bring. I didn't know if we want to do a whole separate.
Yeah. Well, I'll bring it up. We can do a whole separate one. But
what do you mean a whole separate one?
If we want to do
collagen is a whole
I could do like a
thing.
YouTube.
It's huge. You see it in Costco. Yeah. There's just tubs everywhere, and like people are like, throw that in.
Yeah.
So collagen. There's a craze right now of like, I'm going to take collagen specifically, and especially like recommended to older people with connective tissue issues. So essentially, like I was talking earlier about one of these proteins that makes up connective tissue. That's collagen. So connective tissue being like tendons and ligaments and such, like increasing collagen synthesis is going to increase the integrity of the connective tissue here. And so people are like, oh, I'm going to take a collagen supplement then and make sure I don't get injured, make sure my knee repairs or my shoulder repairs well. And collagen, I mean, the idea is great, but you look into the research and an increase in collagen supplementation does not cause connective tissue protein synthesis like we would anticipate. But what's super cool, and we kind of know that now at this point, is increasing collagen supplement is not going to benefit you like
I didn't know
like
that.
we think. So increase in just normal protein. That's how you're going to get the greatest benefit.
Okay.
Now, you know what does increase connective tissue, and this isn't the cool thing I was just getting excited about, but I just wanted to make sure I bring this up before I forget. You know what does increase connective tissue integrity like none other?
No.
Collagen.
No, that's why I said doesn't. Collagen doesn't. Are you listening to me? No. freaking exercise, dude. Like if you strength train, so
right
go
there
into
in
the
front of
gym,
me.
lift some weights. You're going to get so much connective tissue protein synthesis. But and we've known that for forever. But this paper that came out a couple months ago, the one I keep referencing with this 100-gram protein intake, that protein intake actually caused an increase in muscle protein synthesis. So and this was independent of activity. So or did I say muscle protein synthesis? What I meant to say, connective tissue protein synthesis. And so now it's like, oh, if you have a high enough protein intake, it doesn't need to be collagen protein.
So like if you have enough protein, like in excess, it's going to reach more of your muscle, basically, is what you're saying. I say?
Well, I mean, and so, yeah, more protein is going to reach the muscle more, but the tendons and ligaments that make up this connective tissue, if you have added protein, you're also inducing protein synthesis in them. So you're going to bypass this idea of like, oh, I need to supplement with collagen because I got a boo-boo. So yeah, collagen.
So that's fake news.
That's fake news.
Yep.
And did you ever touch up on what protein you would recommend or you use?
Oh, that's right. Sorry about that.
Yeah, so as far as like the protein that I take in, I don't know, the supplement industry just sketches me out because nothing's FDA regulated. They can just hit the shelves and make whatever freaking claim they want. And when you're buying supplements, just want to be cautious and make sure they're third party tested so that they're not the ones making their own claims before it hits the shelves. You want to go with companies that, have gone through this process of sending their product to another company that's totally independent, not in any way affiliated with them. And they're just testing to make sure like, okay, everything that they claim is in this product is actually in this product. There's a cool website called labdoor.com, and you can go to Labdoor and look up a majority of supplements, including protein powders, and see which ones have been third-party tested. They only include third-party tested products. And then you also get, because when it's third-party tested, that company will say, oh, they're full of shit. Like, they had 40 grams of protein in here, but we only found 18. And so it'll grade them. And the highest quality one that I keep coming back to is My Protein Impact Whey. And that one had an A+ rating. Everything that they claimed as far as concentrations of amino acids was legit when it was third-party tested. They tend to be a little bit more expensive, but I'd say, you're getting a higher quality supplement here, and you're not just wasting your money on some company that's like, just trying to make a profit and hit the market by claiming all this stuff.
Yeah, a lot of them have fillers. That's what I've been hearing.
Yeah.
So definitely look for that third-party tested stamp on the back.
Time to switch my protein, I guess. Or at least I should check it.
Your protein might be fine. Yeah, just verify that they're third-party tested because, again, they might be.
Yeah. Gold Standard is what I use. I'm pretty sure they're pretty high up on there.
Yeah, actually, they are ranked highly on Labdoor. I know that. I don't know off the top of my head, but
is there more we want to talk about? What do you got? What else you got?
Is there anything that we missed? I feel like we kind of hit it all.
Yeah.
You said the bads without me even asking. You kind of just said there aren't a whole lot. Like they're really
it seems to be
I always thought like if you ate too much protein, it was always bad for you. But he just said kind of kibosh that question.
Man, really enlightened my protein world right there. I learned a lot. Thanks.
Yeah. So all in all, what I really got pulled from this conversation here is like increase your protein intake. Especially in the morning, helps sustain those energy levels, makes you feel more full. That was something I really preached when I was a trainer. Like, if you're ever hungry or craving something, make sure you eat a protein-dense meal because that's going to fill you up more. Otherwise, you're just going to crush a bag of something or end up eating more because you're not going to feel as full. But I really pulled just the whole science behind it. Like, I always knew, like, get more protein, but he really just broke down everything here.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's just way too many myths here.
Yeah.
But, to, just highlight everything, I guess, you guys don't have any more questions? Nothing else to cover?
I appreciate you breaking
think
down the
so.
BCAAs. I've always wondered what was behind it. Like they
Yeah.
now have it
Yeah,
in the protein.
it's this field that gets. I don't know why we treat protein so differently than other macronutrients. Like people are like, oh, don't get a lot of protein. Like moms all worried about their sons taking protein after sons and daughters taking protein after they resistance train. Like, oh, it's going to give them kidney disease. It's like, why don't you say the same thing about like carbohydrates? Like carbohydrates, if you increase
in
like
the US.
insulin, impact metabolic health. Like, why are we worried about that somewhere that we actually know legit science? Like, why is everyone scared about protein for some reason? I don't get it. And then like, there's all these claims of like trying to make it more difficult than it is.
One of the claims that I remember hearing was if you start taking like whey protein, you're actually going to gain fat if you don't do it right. Is that a thing? Like if, let's say I'm not an avid workout guy and I just started taking whey protein, am I just going to gain fat?
Nope. No, you're not.
Look at that.
The only way you're going to gain
that
fat
all the time.
You're not going to convert your protein into fat. The way you're going to gain fat is by having overconsumption and especially carbohydrates. And again, every time I say something bad about carbohydrates, I think of all the keto people in the background, like, yeah, like that. That's not what I'm saying.
I try and avoid starchy carbs. It's not easy. I like bread.
Eat bread.
You
just don't want to eat a lot. I
do it on very limited basis. No, I shouldn't say very limited, but also, no. Yeah, I do it on a very limited basis.
And we'll talk calorie stuff in our next podcast. But yeah, I mean, this protein area, get more protein. Do whatever you can to increase protein intake. It's not going to harm you. It's going to benefit you.
Or 2.
I mean, for you, with how much training you're doing, I would shoot for that 2.4. It's going to be hard to hit, but do it.
That's why I need you to write down what you... I'm just going to eat what you eat now.
We can share it. We can share it. Now, I want to also highlight, we're taking this protein in to try to induce preservation of lean mass by stimulating protein synthesis. If you do resistance training alone, no protein, no focus on your protein or anything, you're going to induce this protein synthesis and preserve lean mass as well. So if you're scared of protein intake, which you shouldn't be, at least get out there and do some resistance training. And this is represented in a bed rest study where they had these older adults that were on bed rest for a period of time and showed how much lean body mass they were losing. So we know, if you're not moving, you're losing lean body mass. We know that. But then there's a study in chronic kidney disease patients where they had them just resistance train when they're on this super low protein diet. Because again, that's what's recommended in the hospital right now is a low protein diet of like 0.5 grams per kilogram. And so they're on this low protein diet, but they resistance trained. They were able to sustain this lean body mass. Wow. And so you need both resistance training and protein intake to get these benefits. Each one has its own independent effect, but get 2 birds stoned at once by doing both of them, right?
That's really interesting. My aunt's actually going through dialysis right now. So that's really wow, that's huge. I'll have to let her know. That's awesome. Thanks, Dr. Luke.
Yeah.
And if you guys would like to look into any recommendations on protein supplements, if you can't eat it, we're going to have those listed below. Really appreciate everybody listening today.
I'll miss you guys.
Man, this was a lot, this one, but I learned so much. This was great. Really appreciate your time today, Dr. Luke.
I'll
and
miss
Joe,
you guys.
Awesome questions today, man.
Thanks.
You did great.
You guys are great.
You want to say it one more time?
I miss you guys. I'm also talking to their audience.
Thanks again for tuning in to the
good one,
Kickback
everybody.
Science Podcast. We love talking science with all of you, and if you feel the same, you can support us by subscribing, hitting that like button, and giving us a follow on our social media pages. Don't forget, you can submit questions through our website and in the comments section of all our social media. Have a good one, everyone.